I've always had this strange urge to wander where others refuse to go. Empty factories, half-collapsed barracks, ghost towns eaten by weeds and rust. Some call me a stalker, though I never hunted anomalies or chased glowing artifacts. My treasures were the forgotten echoes of history, pieces of memory scattered across dust and silence. That's how I found myself standing at the edge of the valley, staring at a complex of bunkers that no one admitted ever existed. The maps were blank, the locals shook their heads, but the air itself carried a weight, as if the earth wanted to speak. I stepped forward, not knowing that I was about to dig into a war erased from memory, a war that never happened, at least officially. The first sign came with the smell. The air around the entrance carried the scent of burned metal and wet stone, something that shouldn't linger for decades. The gates were twisted open, as if forced from within, and on the rusted steel I saw fresh scratches, carved by hands or claws I couldn't imagine. I tightened the straps of my backpack and switched on the flashlight. The beam cut through layers of dust and cobwebs, and the silence swallowed my steps. Deep inside, the corridors branched like veins of some dead creature. Symbols were painted on the walls, faded insignias that didn't match any army I knew. Strange emblems, broken dates, slogans that read like commands from a language half erased. I touched one of them with my fingers and felt the paint flake away, yet beneath it another layer appeared, a darker mark, like it had been covered intentionally. That was when I heard the whispers, soft, almost like the wind, but carrying words. I froze, pressing my back to the wall. It was closer to chanting, and it came from below. Stairs led downward into the earth, and the deeper I went, the more the temperature dropped. The flashlight flickered once, twice, before settling into a weak glow. The walls were lined with pipes, most of them burst, dripping black water that smelled like oil and iron. I found rooms stacked with crates, their labels scratched off, their contents long removed, except for one, hidden behind debris, its lid half open. Inside lay uniforms, pristine as if untouched by time. They bore insignias I'd never seen, a black sun entwined with barbed lines, and beneath it the motto, Vitae Obscura, life in darkness. Something about those uniforms felt wrong, as if they hadn't been designed for men, but for shadows that imitated men. The stitching was too precise, too inhuman. I closed the crate and moved on, though my hands trembled. At the bottom, I entered a chamber larger than anything above. Rows of chairs faced a cracked screen. Projectors stood in corners, melted as if by intense heat. The floor was scattered with papers, brittle but legible. They spoke of Operation Null Horizon, a campaign to end a conflict before it began. Names of cities crossed out, battles described in detail, yet not a single one matched the history books. Whole wars mapped out, complete with victories and losses, all of it struck through in thick red ink, with one phrase stamped across the pages, expunged. At the bottom, I entered a chamber larger than anything above. Rows of chairs faced a cracked screen. Projectors stood in corners, melted as if by intense heat. The floor was scattered with papers, brittle but legible. They spoke of Operation Null Horizon, a campaign to end a conflict before it began. Names of cities crossed out, battles described in detail, yet not a single one matched the history books. Whole wars mapped out, complete with victories and losses, all of it struck through in thick red ink with one phrase stamped across the pages: expunged. That was when the chanting grew louder, though there was no one in the room. My flashlight dimmed, and in the reflection of the cracked screen, I saw shadows moving behind me, though when I turned, the room was empty. The nights after that visit were worse than any nightmare I'd had before. I woke to the sound of boots marching outside my window, though the street was empty. Once I saw the silhouette of a soldier standing at the end of my hallway, uniform torn, helmet cracked. When I blinked, he vanished, leaving only a smear of mud across the tiles. I returned to the site again, driven by something I couldn't explain. The deeper I went, the stronger the presence became. In one chamber, I found photographs, black and white, faces of men staring into the lens with hollow eyes. Behind them stood machines that didn't belong to any era I knew. Twisted metal structures with cables running into their skulls. Experiments, or something worse. The notes on the back read, "Subjects of the Forgotten War." Every artifact I found told the same story, a war waged in silence, its participants erased, its casualties turned into shadows, and yet the earth remembered. In the soil I found cartridges, unspent yet corroded. In the air I heard whispers of commands, orders shouted by no one alive. It wasn't just a war. It was a rewriting of history itself. The documents revealed that this army, this hidden force, had tried to shape reality, altering battles before they began, erasing entire nations in drafts of existence that never came true. They lost, or maybe they succeeded so well that no one remembered their struggle. Except for me, the idiot who opened the wrong door. One night, as I studied the papers in my room, I heard the sound of an explosion outside, distant yet real. When I ran to the window, the city lay unchanged. But in the reflection of the glass, I saw a battlefield stretching to the horizon, tanks frozen in fire, soldiers locked in eternal combat, all moving in silence like a broken film reel. When I looked back, there was nothing. The Forgotten War had never happened, and yet it was still happening, parallel to our lives, bleeding through cracks in abandoned places. I had seen too much, and I felt them watching me now. The soldiers who weren't supposed to exist, the generals who had no names, the shadows that called themselves history. The final time I returned to the bunker, I didn't go as a curious wanderer. I went as if summoned. The corridors felt alive, pulsing with a rhythm that echoed my heartbeat. I reached the main chamber, and this time the screen flickered with light. Grainy footage played. Armies marching, battles fought, flags raised over ruins, and then it shifted, showing me myself, standing there, watching. The whispers rose to a scream, and I realized they weren't calling for help. They were calling for witnesses. History demands memory, even of wars that never were. The shadows gathered around me, soldiers with hollow eyes and uniforms marked with the black sun. One stepped forward, helmet cracked, skull visible beneath. He raised his hand in a salute. I don't remember leaving. I only remember waking up outside, the bunker sealed behind me, as if it had never existed. My backpack was gone, the documents vanished, but the mud on my boots was fresh, and the smell of burned metal still clung to my clothes. Even now, when I walk through empty places, I hear them. The march of soldiers no book will ever mention. The cries of battles erased from time. The forgotten war never happened, but it lives inside me, and perhaps one day it will return to claim the world that dared to forget.